Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here on Sam's Crafty Castle. So today I am bringing you a video about no line coloring. So some of you may know, especially if you follow me on Instagram, that I'm very big on coloring. I do all the classes and stuff with Kit and Clouder, all that kind of stuff, and I just wanted to share this with you today. So I will say no line coloring is not necessarily a huge area of expertise for me. But I do enjoy it and I wanted to give it a try and give you some of my tips from someone who does struggle with it a little bit. So I'm coloring today is the Wild Roses stamp set, and I have stamped it in the Gina K Design Soft Stone ink. It's just a really nice soft gray. It's actually pretty much my favorite gray all the time. And when I do no line coloring, I generally prefer to do it as a gray with a gray ink, but you can use any soft colored ink that you want. The Gina K Amalgam line has some really good ones like Warm Glow and Barely There that are in Whisper, which are in more of the peachy tone, and then Whisper is more of the gray tone, kind of no line coloring, but they're really light. You can use brown. I used to do this all the time with Memento's Cocoa Brown. I forget the name of it. If that's it, I'm sorry. But whatever their brown is, I used to do this with their brown all the time. Gina K has an amalgam, which is chocolate truffle. So you can use any brown, gray, peaches. Ink on 3 has their no line coloring ink, their fade out ink. So you have lots of options. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy something if you want to do this technique. And while you guys are watching me color, I'm just gonna share some of my tips and stuff for this. And you can see with all the cuts and stuff, this took me a long time to do. I probably did it over the span of about 3 to 4 days. And when I first imported this video into my video software to edit it, it was well over 3 hours long. So don't feel like you have to rush. Just remember, in general, people who make videos, we tend to speed them up because you guys don't want to sit and watch us color for 4 hours. So we speed them up. I sped this video up 4 times to get it into 20 minutes. So just be aware that don't be discouraged if you find that it's taking you a lot of time and you're like, oh, she did it in 20 minutes. I didn't do it in 20 minutes. I did it in several hours. So again, just a reminder that it does take a long time, and this one takes longer too because I did pencils, and pencils are a very time-consuming medium to work with if you want to do them well. So I shouldn't say that. You can do them well without taking the time, but if you whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. So because the thing with pencils is you want to do work in layers, so it's not like markers where you can kind of lay down one layer of color and get a nice blend and be done. To get a really nice blend, you really need to work in layers over and over and over again. And you'll see even on this image I didn't, just because it was smaller. So I did only do one layer through the whole thing. But generally what you want to do, and that's what I mean, like you don't have to do layers to do it well. Like it still looks nice when it comes out, but it would have looked better if I would have taken the time to do it in a couple of layers. But again, this image is small, and smaller images I don't tend to do as many layers on because I just don't put as much detail into them, which is another tip for no line coloring. Is remember, with the lighter ink, you're gonna lose the details in the stamp. Like once you color over it with the darker colors, you're not gonna see the gray or the fade out ink or the peach or whatever color you're using. It's gonna fade a little bit. So now if you use a brown like the Memento one or the chocolate truffle from Gina K that I was talking about earlier, then you won't lose as much because it's a little darker. But like this gray is pretty soft, so you do lose most of the detail from the stamp once I color it in, because I did use a little bit of darker colors on it. And that brings me to my tip on choosing colors. So the other thing to remember is that the fewer colors you use, the more contrast you want between the colors. So I'm not working on the flowers just yet, but I will be. And I lost a lot of the detail in the petals of the flowers. And that is mostly just because I didn't use colors that were different enough. The blues that I picked were too close together. And I originally did have kind of my method for picking colors in the video, but I ended up taking it out just because it didn't work on this one. And like I said, my blues that I picked were too close together. Now, if I was coloring an image normally with a black I shouldn't say normally, but if I was coloring an image with a black outline, like I might do other times, you can pick colors that are a little closer together. You also have to think about how many colors you're using. The less colors you use, the more contrast you need between the two colors. So, like, for example, this image is small, so I knew I was only going to use probably 2 colors. I had a third one out just in case, but I ended up not using it because I just didn't have the room on this image to put the detail in the way that I would have liked to. I shouldn't say would have liked to. I just didn't. I didn't take the time to do it. So basically, the fewer colors you use, so because I only used 2 colors, I should have picked a darker color than what I used for the dark kind of lines of the flower. And for the details, I should have picked a much darker blue than I used. So you really, on the flowers, like the petals, have almost 0 of the little lines and details and stuff in them because like I said, I just didn't use a dark enough blue. And you can see I kind of started to figure it out already here because I was having a similar issue with the greens I used on the leaves, but it came out much better than what I used the contrast came out much better on the leaves than it did on the blue of the flowers. You just lose, like, here you can see I'm trying to use my darker blue, or what I thought I was going to use as my darker blue, to go in and put all the details in on the flowers, and it just was still too late, and I should have used the other color I had pulled out in the first place, but I didn't. So learn from my mistake and make sure you pick colors that are a little different. I shouldn't say a little different, but if you're only using 2 colors, pick the less colors you use, the more variation you need between your colors, the more the darker shade you need to do your details. So that's pretty much all of my tips in regards to general no-line coloring. I know I shared a little bit of my pencil ones as far as making sure you work in layers, all that kind of stuff, which basically that's my biggest tip for pencils is understand it'll take time. It's not quick. If I'm looking to do something quick, I'm probably going to pull out my markers before I even think about touching my pencils because you just have to build up the layers of the pencil so much compared to the markers. So that's, just like I said, something to be aware of, but do by no means think that no-line coloring, you can only do it with pencils. Pencils is my favorite medium to do no-line coloring with just because typically I feel like I have a little bit more control over the details with the pencils. So when I'm trying to keep the details in the stamps, it's just easier to keep the details and make them if you pick the right colors and don't do what I did with the blues here. But with the markers, you don't necessarily get as fine of a control, which is actually something that I've been working on with my kit and color classes, and it's actually been going well. I notice a difference that I'm getting more detail with my markers than I used to. So it is just a lot of practice, and that's my other big thing is your first one's you're not going to like your first one. You're probably not going to like your 800th one. And even after you've made 800, you're probably still going to make ones that you don't like, but that doesn't mean they're bad, and don't throw them away, because we're our own worst critics, and we're always going to think what we make is not as good as the person next to us, but they're probably over there thinking that ours is better than theirs. So just remember to, don't judge yourself too harshly. It's still beautiful either way. And it just takes a lot of practice, a lot. So, I've been taking the kit and color classes for almost a year now. And, I'm behind. I haven't finished all of the ones that I've gotten over, a year since it's a self-paced thing. But it's definitely, like, I can see a difference between my first one. And even if I go back to, like, before I was doing the classes, and I mean, I started getting into the coloring thing when I was about 18, just after I started college. And, like, looking at some of the early stuff I did versus the stuff I do now is crazy. And my dad commented on it all the time, how, like, as a kid, I couldn't even stay in the lines, and now I can do all this crazy stuff. So just remember, it's, you know, it's a lot of practice and a lot of time, but you just have to stick with it until you figure it out. And that's why pencils aren't for everyone, because pencils do take a lot of time. If you don't have the time or the patience, probably not for you. You're probably better off with markers, as they generally come together a little quicker. And like I said, you don't need all the layers and all that stuff. So you can see here I'm trying to bring that darker marker. We were just talking about markers. I'm trying to bring the darker pencil in to make sure to see if I can get any of that back, and it didn't work. But, so, what else did I have to say? Oh, right. So, you don't have to just do no line coloring with colored pencils. You can also do it with markers and watercolor. My second favorite way to do no line coloring is with watercolor, and just because it's kind of fun, because you don't have to like watercolor is very uncontrollable. You just kind of have to let it go where it's going to go, so it's never going to be perfect. But especially with flowers, it's kind of fun because all flowers look a little different too. That's my other suggestion. The first time you do this, do it with flowers. Do it with some leaves, something organic. Don't try to do it with like a person or an animal or something where you want to get a very specific look, because you just won't. And you'll get frustrated by it. But flowers can look like whatever flowers want to look like. So they're a lot more forgiving than other things. So that would be another tip. I just thought of that one. And then the other thing too, to make sure if you're doing it with a different medium, if you're doing it with markers or pencils, make sure you pick an ink that is compatible with your whatever medium you're using. You don't want to do watercolors and pick an ink that's going to run because it reacts with water. You don't want to pick, do something with Copics and pick something that's not Copic friendly. So again, just be aware of that when you're picking out your ink. I know like the Gina K Amalgam line works with everything. The Fade Out ink I'm pretty sure works with everything. Distress ink, I am not as sure on. I know my friend Hannah, who does a lot of the watercoloring, I know she likes the Antique Linen for her watercolor no line. I would think it would probably be fine with pencils too. I don't know about markers. I'm pretty sure alcohol markers are a no-go with distress inks. So those are kind of my no line coloring tips for you. Like I said, you can do it with anything. Not just that, not just with your pencils. I just use pencils this time. I am thinking about probably doing a no line coloring with all three mediums that I use, which are markers, pencils, and watercolors. So that we may visit this again with the other things, just because I have been in kind of a no line kick lately, which is funny because, like I said, no line is not usually my favorite thing to do to color, but as you can see, I still made this into a card for you. So I just quickly, because that wasn't the focus of the video, I didn't really show anything other than me putting it together. And that's it. That's all I really had to say about no line coloring for you guys today. So I am going to leave you with a few pictures, and I will see you again soon, and I hope you have a crafty day. And that's all I got. So, see you next time.